Hasselbank's rating of strikers. So they were asking him which is world class and who's not world class.
Alexander Isak.
Not world class.
Victor Gyökeres.
Not world class.
Erling Haaland.
Potential.
Julian Alvarez.
Not world class.
Kylian Mbappe.
World class.
Harry Kane.
World class.
João Pedro.
Potential.
So he got to Isak, he said not world class. I think Gyökeres, he said not world class. Vinicius, not world class. Mbappe, he said world class, fair enough. Harry Kane, he said world class. I don't know if you've seen the video.
I have.
Do you agree with him? Because we've seen, for me personally, we've seen a decline in football. Anyway, but before we carry on, guys, welcome to Pitchside Nuggets on the Playmakers Hub, brought to you by myself, Dasuki, and our one and only sport journalist, Adebari. Right, so back to what we'll be talking about today. So I think personally, like I was saying, I think we've seen a decline in quality football players. We still have quality football players. I mean, there's still the likes of, Yamal and the Pedris, Frankie de Jong, Mbappe, Rodri, Declan Rice. There's still quality scattered around world football. But we've seen a decline in entertainers. Do you think that's why Hasselbank has kind of not labeled these particular players as world class? But is he world class in his own days? Does he have the, I'm not gonna say right, but is Hasselbank the guy you want to ask who's a world class player or not?
So the funny thing is that if Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was playing football today, I think he would be considered a world class player. However, during his prime, during his era, sadly he wasn't, because the competition was absolutely ridiculous. Hasselbank, during his time, there were strikers like, Ronaldo de Lima, Thierry Henry, Alessandro Del Piero, Totti, Trezeguet, Romario. Okay, I'm even talking about other foreign players. Let's talk about other Dutch strikers. There was Dennis Bergkamp, there was Marco van Basten, even ahead of him, Ruud van Nistelrooy was ahead of him. When Ruud came into the Dutch setup in 2002, Ruud van Nistelrooy was ahead of Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. So I think that just goes to show you that, I think that answers your question. During his heydays, Hasselbank wasn't a world-class striker, but he was a very, very good striker. Don't get me wrong. I think his best stint as a footballer was probably with Chelsea. I think that's where he had his best stint as a footballer. But, he had decent stints at the likes of Middlesbrough. He played well for Leeds United as well. He had a very good partnership with Harry Q. I think he had a decent time at Leeds United. And then I think the time at Atletico Madrid was probably when he seemed to have, should I say, disappeared from the scene a bit, because he had a bit of an issue in England. Leeds United didn't want to sell him to Chelsea, so they sold him to Atletico. He had 2 seasons there, and then before he then came to Chelsea. And sadly, he missed out on Chelsea's introductory era to championships under Roman Abramovich. When Mourinho came, Mourinho didn't bother to want to keep Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. Everybody knew that when Mourinho was coming, he only wanted Didier Drogba. While he was at Porto, he wanted Drogba. He didn't get Drogba. And immediately he came to Chelsea, he was like, look, Roman, I want this striker.
I watched a podcast where Hasselbank said Mourinho didn't even say nothing to him, which I think wasn't the best way to treat a player. At least let him know, look, you're a good player, but I don't have you in my plans. But he was like, Mourinho said nothing to him. It was him out of the team.
Yeah, but that's if you think about it, then Mourinho was at the peak of his powers as being the special one.
He was
exactly, and Roman Abramovich basically enabled him. Look, whatever you want, I love what you did at Porto. Come and do it here. And Mourinho got all the players he wanted. He got Ida Gudjonsen, he got Ian Robben, he got Damien Duff. He got Claude Makelele, he got
Carvalho. Yeah,
You know,
Ferreira,
he got Ferreira. You know, he got everyone that he wanted really, and he was able to make do with the squad. But you know, just like you watched in that podcast, you know, Drogba didn't have the best of seasons in his first year, but nevertheless, he kicked on. But you know, that's life. But I mean, just to answer your question, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank wasn't world class, and I think what we saw in that video was just his personal opinion. I don't think everyone, and I don't think everybody's going to hold it to water, if I can use that term, because I do think that Erling Haaland is a world class striker. I do think that Julian Alvarez is a world class striker.
Same. That was the one I felt. I thought he was going to say world class for Alvarez, and then when he said not world class, not even potential, then I thought
for Isaac, you know, that was weird. And then he said potential for Ekitike.
Yeah,
you know,
and then Joao Pedro, he said potential for Joao Pedro, and you're saying Alvarez is not world class, not even potential. Come on, man.
It's weird. So that's
I pick Alvarez every day over Joao Pedro.
Do you understand? Like for me, I think it was just down to his personal opinion. I don't think he was necessarily being objective. Maybe if he watches the video again and he's placed in that position again, maybe he might have different answers. But 100%. For me, I think what is termed as a world-class striker or a world-class player is someone who performs at a high level consistently for years. And I think these players that we've mentioned, I think Isak for the last 2-3 years has been good. Erling Haaland, since he's been at Borussia Dortmund, I think he has been world class. Julian Alvarez, since he stepped foot at Manchester City, even though he spends 2 seasons there, for me he has been world class. I mean, he showed the quality as well during the World Cup. So I think these are world class strikers. Ekitike potential, I think so. I think Ekitike is a very good footballer. But obviously, we know that he has a lot to learn, judging by him taking off his shirt after scoring a winner against 19th May Southampton. And the slot said that was stupid. You know, those were the words of his manager. But he's a young striker, he will grow. Joao Pedro, for me, I find it difficult to see Joao Pedro becoming world class. I don't see it in him. You get me? Yeah, you know, so, but definitely we know that Joao Pedro is a good striker. That's what we know. But hey, like I said, those were just opinions of Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. I don't think he was necessarily being objective.
I totally agree. But I kind of expected more from him, to be honest, in terms of rating these players. Some of them that I thought were closer to world class, but like you said, it's his opinion, and if he's asked this question again, it might change. So that brings us to like the topic we're having today regarding top quality players, especially entertainers. And I think when you're talking about entertainers in football, it's mostly number 10s. You know, the players the South Americans refer to as Enganché, right? The JJ Okochas, the Ronaldinhos, you know. The last breed that we might have really experienced could have been Neymar, you know. So, what do you think must have caused this decline of entertainers in football? So with defenders, we don't really expect defenders to entertain, even though we had the likes of Roberto Carlos, Cafu sometimes, Marcelo. Most recently, we've had a few defenders that could still entertain. But it's mostly midfield players and then maybe wingers. But midfielders are the guys that would dribble because they have like a whole lot of space around them, you know. And it looks difficult, but they make it look easy. What's changed? The likes of Riquelme, we don't have these players anymore.
I think for me, it's the major reason has been the fact that Pep Guardiola, first of all.
No way.
I was trying to look for a better way to put it, but Pep Guardiola. And then Pep Guardiola being successful with his brand of football, other managers wanted to follow suit. And then it became a thing whereby football systems also began to follow that. So when I say football systems, I mean academies, I mean sporting institutions. They began to follow that way. And also, I think another thing has to be money. Money is another reason why that there's a dying breed of those type of footballers, and how money comes into play is how teams are more desperate to win, and desperate to win in a way that they are willing to sacrifice their showboaters to play a systemic type of football, to play a particular system whereby they retain a lot of pressure and they are ready to hit teams on the counter attack. I think the perfect example of this example might sound odd, but if you critically analyze it, I think you might agree with me. After the 2006 World Cup in Germany, prior to that World Cup, Germany hosting it, they really felt that they had a good team because, they had a couple of young players that came into the team, the likes of Philipp Lahm, Lukas Podolski, Bastian Schweinsteiger. These players were the new crop of German stars, and they really felt like this set of players will propel them to winning the World Cup. But they got to the semi-final, and then when they faced the big dogs, they found out that, look, we can't actually compete. We can't just set these players out there to, do whatever they want to do and feel good. So what happened after that? They went back to the drawing board. The likes of Hansi Flick were given more of a deeper role. They were given more freedom in terms of how they wanted to set up the system of football. Obviously, at that time, Joachim Low was the head coach, but these coaches under him, majorly Hansi Flick, they were able to help him create a system and a structure, and which was the 4-2-3-1. And yeah, despite the fact that Mesut Ozil was the number 10, if you take a look at the way Ozil played when he first of all burst onto the scene, Ozil was a very direct attacking midfielder. Not too much of flair, only when necessary. More of like elegant football. He wasn't. Mr. Ozil is not your typical Enganché, because your typical Enganché has a bit of physique involved with him. Aside the technique. And for me, the perfect examples of Enganchés, for me, Rui Costa, Lucho Gonzalez, Pablo Aimar,
Veron, would you consider
Veron? Sometimes Veron could play deeper. Sometimes he enjoyed to play deeper, but these players, they were the perfect examples for me. And Ozil was different, but the thing about Ozil was that despite the technique, despite the vision, he was able to work hard. He would drop back, link up play with the fullbacks, link up play with the wingers, and that was it for Germany, and that began their rise and their dominance back into football. And then we saw that at the 2010 World Cup, they got all the way to the semi-finals as well, sadly missing out. And then came 2014, and then they eventually achieved it. Till date, they still try to maintain that structure, even though over the last 5 years they've experimented with 3 at the back, due to lack of quality personnel. But hey, at the end of the day, for the World Cup qualifiers, they've gone back to the 4-2-3-1 again under Julian Nagelsmann. So when the Mannschaft did that, other football clubs, other academies, they wanted to start to model that since they saw the success. So that's my example when I talk about money and system. And then talking about Pep Guardiola, we all know Pep Guardiola's system is a tiki-taka. However, Pep Guardiola's teams are organized to the T, to the detail, to the tiniest detail. And the only player that Pep Guardiola has ever given license to do as he wishes is Lionel Messi. I've heard Pep Guardiola say so many times whenever certain players seem to have been ostracized by him and the media picks up on it. And look, Pep will say to you that he will call the name of the player and say, is he Messi? He's not Messi. And you can understand why, because Messi could do and undo. False 9, right winger, number 9, whatever it is, Messi will perform for you, and every other person would perform their roles as well. For crying out loud, Pep Guardiola made Thierry Henry play left wing. He made David Villa play left wing. So there was already a system. But hey, so what happened to the other players? They had specific instructions and they had to follow it. Talking about Pep Guardiola and Thierry Henry, Henry was speaking one time, talking about his time with Pep and how he had to learn to play on the left again, but in a different way. You know, Henry started out as a winger, so he knew how to play on the left, and obviously he loved to drive him from the left. But holding the width was something he learned in a different way from Pep, and he was saying that there was a particular game where he had the ball, he was on the left. Instead of him, holding the width for the team, he decided to drive inside, dribble, have an attempt on goal, but it didn't go in. And he said in less than 10 minutes, he was subbed off because he failed to listen to instruction. And obviously, Henry wanted to be there. He wanted to win. That's why he left Arsenal to go to Barca. So he put his head down. He learned the back away. And that was it. You know, the rest is history. So we know that with Pep Guardiola, the fullbacks have license to go forward. However, the defensive midfielder must always be the protector of the two centre backs.
That was where I was going to also, like with Pep Guardiola, right? And I think for an Enganché to flourish, he probably needs two players behind him. You know, in the days where you play 4-2-2, how football was played, you always had two sitting midfield players. And one of the two strikers, you could have an Enganché as one of them who could drop deep and play in that free role like a Pele, you know, or the Ronaldinhos or the Pablo Aymars and Riquelmes. So do you think what happened with Pep was Pep probably thought, okay, and in those days, goalkeepers kick the ball long. So when they kick it long, you want your striker to bring it down and then probably it gets to you. Your Enganché picks up the second ball and then he starts to operate. Exactly. Pep Guardiola didn't want that. He wanted the build-up to be from the back. So do you think Pep Guardiola kind of substituted his number 10 for his number 6? Because with Pep Guardiola, his number 6 would kind of be his Enganché. His number 6 will always be good on the ball. What his number 10 would have been doing up front, I think his number 6 would be doing that. So I think that's what happened, and that really changed the game, because you can't really dribble in that position, because if you lose the ball, you're exposed. You're exposing your defenders. So you'd be more, even if you have the skill, like only Sergio Busquets was able to showcase certain level of brilliance and skill in that position without the fear of losing the ball, maybe because he had the likes of Messi and Iniesta who understands him and they can be there for him to bail him out most of the time. But if you're not that skillful, you'll be caught out and your team will just keep conceding goals. So maybe that's what happened, and I can understand you with that. I can really understand. I think I agree.
Yeah, so basically, Pep Guardiola substituted his Enganché for a regista.
Exactly.
You know, if you remember when Pep took over, in less than 6 months, Ronaldinho opted to leave for AC Milan. In fact, they spent one season together. They played one season together, and then after that, Ronaldinho left for AC Milan in January of the next season. Oh, well, it was a summer, pardon me. It was a summer. So, that's what Pep wants. And Pep is obsessed with his number 6. I remember when Rodri was... I remember during the unveiling of Rodri, during the press conference, Pep Guardiola's first press conference after Rodri was signed, he was talking about Rodri and he was like, he's perfect. He's even got the hair.
Hairstyle,
Exactly.
Even the hairstyle,
he's crazy like that. He's crazy with the details, and he has an idea of what he wants the players to be like, and that's why Sergio Busquets was perfect for him. Obviously he coached Busquets for the Barca B team, so he knew a lot about him, and he loved the way he played. Because of Sergio Busquets, Yaya Toure began to play centre back. He began to play right back, and eventually Yaya got the notion that, look, if I remain at Barca, I'm probably not going to be playing competitive football as much as I want to. And lucky for him, he was able to go to Manchester City, and the rest is history. But yes, so Pep, obviously, because Pep also played in that position, and then obviously him learning from the likes of Johan Cruyff and co, he's really embedded in that system, and he feels that whoever is at the middle of the park, at the base, is someone who can control the game, which we do see a lot now in football. Yeah, so I think that's just it, and it was just based on preference. And now over the years, we've seen other players do the same. We've seen, maybe not in the same caliber as Sergio Busquets, because obviously Busquets
at least pretty
is
close.
the blueprint. Exactly. But you know, the funny thing is that in Italy, they had registers as well. There was Andrea Pirlo, there was Ambrosini, you know, and now over the years, we've seen other players like Paredes, we've seen Marco Verratti,
Barella. No, Barella is
yes,
not really a register. It's more for box to box.
exactly. You know, we've got players like Rodri, we've got Zubimendi, you know, players that can basically make things happen from the middle of the park. But we're also saying that when you play in that system, you can be exposed as well. It can be difficult for you to maneuver certain type of opponents, especially when the press is really high on you, especially when you've got like energetic attackers who are willing to chase, who are willing to press man for man, you know. So despite the fact that that system of football has been successful, it has its downsides. And I think let me buttress more on how it has really, really affected football. So obviously, I mentioned Pep Guardiola was one of the major reasons why the Enganché seems to have faded. And academies have modeled that route. You know, I've been at a couple of, should I say, tryouts or academy trainings, and I see the way certain managers berate players that want to do the most with the ball. You know, they don't give them that freedom to make mistakes and learn from it. And whenever it seems to be that a player is doing too much with the ball, that player is sidelined, that player is taken off. You know, coaches want a direct approach. They want players who, and you know, there was even a time where it seemed to be that we're going to revert back to right-footed players playing on the right side of midfield, left-footed players playing on the left side of midfield. Pep did that with Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sané. And it was looking lethal.
Gareth Bale.
Exactly, Gareth Bale as well. You know, was really, really looking lethal. And that's what started seeping through academies around the world. Everyone started playing either a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 with a lone six and double eights. And, you know, that's how we started. And for some academies, they are still doing it till today. For some football systems are still doing it till today. It's just in recent times where more enlightened coaches are starting to understand that, look, you don't necessarily need to copy a certain system of football. It's good for you to admire systems of football, but you also need to pay attention to your players. You need to set up a team according to the strength of the players. You need to set up a team in a way that it would complement your best players. You need to set up your team in a way that you can survive. Depending on the caliber of team you have, you know, you need to learn how to adapt to situations. And also, we've seen advancement in tactics. The tactical approach from managers has caused certain managers to shift their approach, you know, to how they want to go about games. And we've seen that managers that are quite stubborn and want to stick to certain systems, they find it difficult at the end of the day. You know, I think that's one issue that Simone Inzaghi had at Inter. I think that's one issue that Arteta has had over his time at Arsenal. And a couple of other managers that I could mention, but it's very important for a manager to learn how to be flexible and to actually pay attention. It's funny that I mentioned Arteta as one manager who I feel, who I feel his pragmatism has affected the team, but he also did the right thing when he took over at Arsenal. You know, when he took over at Arsenal, he was smart enough to realize that, look, this team is not ready to play my style of football immediately. What did he do? He decided to steady the ship. You know, avoid relegation,
cling to the strength of the players.
The back five. You know, like I've said previously, his own method of the back five was basically to curb individual errors and create a balance between defense and attack. That's what it was.
And then you can start switching and changing personnel gradually.
Exactly. So gradually, before we can now say the current Arsenal team that we do have. So Arteta is a perfect example of how to I think bring the best of your players, and you know, creating a system that brings out the best out of your best players.
Yeah,
honestly,
you know, I have one funny. Would I say? I don't know if I'll call it a conspiracy theory. Why I think, you know, those entertainers and enganches have phased away from the game. So if I'm sure we all understand that most of these creative players and entertainers, they are usually from South America. Then you have some from Africa. the Yannick Bolasis, the JJ Okocha, Giovanni, a couple of them that would dribble and show flair. Even Kanu Wanko, you can maybe, put him in that category as well because he was such a silky player and really good. So I think the emergence of social media, let me land, hear me out. I think the emergence of social media. So when we were younger, when they were in social media, when you come back from school, you drop your school bag, you're out with the boys to play football. You're free, you're playing. You're not trying to get on your phone. You're not trying to watch YouTube videos and see how Neymar is doing this skill and that. You're not. You're just going out to have fun. And what is fun for us when we play football is when you dribble your mates. Of course, you want to score. Of course, you want to win. But I think what I really enjoyed more, and I can say for my peers at that time, was the dribbling. Who dribbles more? While we were playing, we were screaming JJ Okocha, we were screaming these dribblers, especially Okocha though, So I think now with kids these days, they're on their iPads, they're on their phones, and it's not just in the Western world. I think even South America, Africa, is the same now all over. You go to the streets now, and then like you said, Pep Guardiola, now even kids that have gone out to play, they are telling you tiki-taka. Someone is now telling you the position that he plays, maybe as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, he's telling you he's a DM, he's Rodri, or, things like that. He wants to model his game as he's seen. While we saw dribblers, we saw pure entertainers. So I'm hoping that it will turn around at some point because, at work, while I was working with one construction company, Multiplex, so I met a guy called Kevin. He's he coaches on the 8th team in a club in Leicester. I can't really remember the name of the club. So we're having a conversation, and he was talking about how players are not playing freely anymore. Recently, CAF also said the reason why if Brazilian players keep going to England, they are not going to win the World Cup. So this is him trying to say, with England, because of so much money, like you mentioned, that has been pumped into football, a manager is going to tell you to execute. He needs numbers. This is now business. It's not. So it's business before entertainment now. It used to be entertainment before business. But right now, I think it's business before entertainment. Do you get? So, he was saying that now he wants his players to play with more freedom, without much restrictions. If managers can really do that, and with the systems you've seen now, let's look at clubs that I think it's only Messi that has still really succeeded as a lone 10 with Argentina recently in the World Cup, 2022 World Cup. Without that, when you look at most of the teams that have succeeded, these are teams that have had a lone 6 and double 8s. Most of the time, you look at the Man City, Barcelona, PSG recently, even Arsenal, now that you've started playing really well. Chelsea back in the day, Mikel had to sit, So for some reason, I feel like it's only Man United that we've tried to use 2 number 6, which almost worked, but it still didn't with Fred and McTominay at some point, because I'm looking at post-Fergie, the time that I've seen Man United, like I felt like we were getting there was during Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's reign. And he had two sitting center midfielders. We didn't even have like a DM. It wasn't a 4-3-3, it was a 4-2-3-1. With Bruno as the 10. So if Bruno was an Enganché, maybe United would have succeeded with that style of play. So, I understand. It's really difficult. You can't blame teams that want to evolve. Like they say, the game has evolved. So if you want to win, you want to protect your back four, you want to build from the back, you can't necessarily build from the back effectively without a register. You need a register to get the ball from the back 4 or from the back 3, and now dictate the pace, dictate the tempo of the game, and But if we look at Real Madrid, Casemiro is not necessarily a register; he's a destroyer, I think. But then they had a Tony Cruz who I don't even know what profile of player that is.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
I don't know what the profile. He's a register. He's an Enganché. He's just he's a hybrid. I think they call them hybrids. I think that's There's not too many of them.
Sorry to cut you short, but I think after Tony Cruz was for me Thiago Alcantara. I think these players 100%. Were different breed. Honestly,
Barry, there's three of them, right? I can't. Maybe Pirlo had that vibe as well. Tony Cruz, Alcantara, and Frankie De Jong.
Yeah,
these are the three hybrid players that I think they play the role so well. They understand what is needed for them for this team to perform, and they do it effortlessly. Pirlo kind of was like that as well. But apart from that, everyone is either you're a 6 or you're a 10 or you're an 8 and things like that. So what do you think needs to be done for pure entertainment to come back to football? John Terry recently said he doesn't enjoy watching football anymore. What do you think needs to be done for us to start enjoying, like, get entertainment? I don't know if that can ever happen because there's so much at stake now in terms of financial commitments.
So you see, that's the problem. We've got so many games in football calendars, and clubs are now battling to be financially safe. We've got UEFA financial fair play rules. We've got the PSR rules in the Premier League as well. But generally, even La Liga have their own economical financial rules that affect teams. So every league is trying to make sure that the 20 teams that are competing season in, season out are financially stable and they're able to make some level of profit. Obviously, we know that the levels of profit differ, but associations are trying to ensure that now, with those systems in play, it means that managers are always under pressure to achieve one thing or the other. All these managers are given targets to achieve, and they would want to achieve it by any means necessary. Now, when it comes to them wanting to achieve it by any means necessary, it means sometimes playing safe. It means sometimes not letting go. It means holding on to the handbrakes. It means being safe. It means parking the bus. It could mean parking the bus. Sometimes it could also mean counter-attacking football. Being able to absorb pressure and waiting to hit the opponent on the counter. So yes, it seems to be difficult because we've even started to see that. I think over the last 6 to 7 years, we've seen that having possession does not necessarily mean you are the better team. Neither does it mean that you will be guaranteed a victory at the end of the day. It's all about teams taking their chances and being able to get the maximum points and being able to move past in a tournament. So with all this being said, I think if we're ever going to see the return of natural number 10s, I think we need to start having managers who are willing to take risks with their players. We need coaches that are going to be able to do that. We need coaches that are going to allow players to honestly showcase themselves and express themselves. But then again, we do have a couple of players that will always express themselves irrespective of the system in which they're playing. Obviously, Neymar is still one of them. I think another player, you might not really agree with this, but I think Joao Felix is in there.
He is supposed to be that sort of player. But that might be the reason why he has struggled.
Yeah. I think another player has to be Eberichi Eze. I think Ryan Cherki as well tries his best. He's technically gifted. We know that as well. Those are the names that currently come to mind. So with these players that I've mentioned, imagine their managers having full trust in them, letting them do as they please. But here's now the downside. When you give these sort of players the keys to the kingdom, you need to have a solid team around them, that the team does not make them look like weaknesses or liabilities, because there's always a risk when it comes to dribbling. There's always a risk when you constantly want the nutmegs. There's always a risk when you are driving with the ball. You could come up against a very physical team that are always going to find a way to get the ball from you. You could come up against technically gifted defensive midfielders and defenders who actually know how to play football. It's not just about clearing the ball from them. They can intelligently get the ball off you. So what then happens
and take a pass real quick and create turn defense into attack with just one pass.
Exactly. So what then happens to your team when your creator is nicked off the ball? Your team needs to always be switched on. Everybody needs to concentrate. Everybody needs to understand their position. But most importantly, every other person needs to play as a unit in order to protect that player, because you know that chances are going to flow through that player. You know that goals are going to come through that player. You know that this is most likely your best player. And at the end of the day, managers need to also still find a way to make everybody happy. Man management is important. Man management is very, very key. And then making other players feel valuable as well, and letting them know that, look, it's a collective thing. If we can do that, if we can start from there, once we hack that with the managers having the license and having the guts to even do that, we then start sipping it down through the academies. Now let these players play. I've listened to a fantastic analogy by Arsene Wenger when he once spoke about the development of a player. He did say that the best time to probably introduce a child into football is between the ages of 5 to 9. That's a very, very good age, and the best time to then harness those skills that they have between 10 and 15. From the ages of 16 to 18 is when the ball is now in the court of the player, and it's now time for the player to determine, how much do I really want this? How far am I willing to go? And obviously, by the time the player is 18, there's an expectancy of a certain level of physical development in order to help the player. And from the age of 18, if you're good enough, you should be playing first team football anywhere. That's just the truth. I would quote Sir Alex Ferguson, when he was questioned, when he brought in the class of 92 into his team at that time. And Fergie said, look, if you're good enough, you're old enough. It's just that simple. However, what Fergie did was to still protect those players. Yes, the likes of Beckham, the Neville brothers, Nicky Butt, Scholes, they got into the team and Ryan Giggs. But hey, who were still the main players in the team? We still had the likes of Dennis Irwin. We still had Steve Bruce. We still had Eric Cantona.
Peter Schmeichel.
We still had top midfielders. There was still Roy Keane. There was still a Peter Schmeichel. We had leaders in the team. We had other players that were playing in the positions of these young players who were more experienced than them. So you can easily chop and change your team and also create a good balance between youth and experience. So I think all of these things are what managers really need to take cognizance of. Once managers begin to do it with the first teams, it's then going to be easier for them to pass that knowledge through the academies, through the grassroots level. When the feeder teams watch the big teams do this, they will then want to copy, because everybody wants to be successful. And everybody wants to be entertained at the end of the day, because I'm sure you must wonder why a lot of times exhibition games with old legends are always sold out. They're sold out because those legends are so expressive.
They've given us a lot.
Ronaldinho, Seedorf, till date, whenever they play Legends match or charity games, the stadium is packed out because people want to see these guys entertained once again. So, that's it for me.
I'll give you an example. Imagine in Manchester United, Kobe Mainoo cannot get games because he's not physical enough. But in terms of a proper number 6, I don't think there's any better player in that squad other than him. Whether a number 6 or even, he's sort of like a hybrid as well. He has that quality, but he just needs to be nurtured properly. That's why for me personally, I would really like to see him leave Man United, because I think I like good football more than I like Man United. I'm not even going to lie. Honestly, I would rather see Kobe Mainoo leave United, go somewhere else, maybe like Borussia Dortmund or Let me see what other team can really help develop him. Maybe even the Brighton. Some
Leipzig.
kind of thank you, Leipzig. As you know, I'm looking at Germany, but I'm also looking at in the Premier League, what team would really give this kind of player time to
Brighton is a good shout. Brighton is a good shout. At this point in time, Bournemouth under Andoni Iraola is a very, very good shout.
And I remember before
I think the issue is that we don't know how long Iraola is going to remain at Bournemouth. I think he's a very good manager, and he might not be there for a long time.
He's not going to be there for too long. Chelsea, I'm looking at Chelsea. Chelsea might snap him because I don't understand what Maresca is doing now. Maresca is, I'm not confident about him anymore. I think, anyway, before we go on to Maresca, maybe that would be a different episode. With Kobe Mainu, so for me, I would like to see him leave United, honestly. Go to maybe Borussia Dortmund, harness your skill, then eventually end up in Real Madrid or Barcelona. I would be so glad to see him reach his potential. Hopefully we'll get to see entertainers, dribblers back in football, because that's what I watch again. We thank God for the likes of Lamine Yamal and Desiree Doué, Kvaratskhelia, Eberechi Eze, and Florian Wirtz. People see me back Florian Wirtz, but it's just because I just love the way he plays the game. It's not just all about the numbers. His touches. That I heard someone say people used to go to camp to Santiago Bernabeu just to watch Zidane control the ball.
Yeah.
You get. So I would pay money to go and watch Zidane control the ball down, pay money and go and watch Bruno Fernandes score a goal. Honestly, I'd rather pay to go. Bruno scores a penalty. I'd rather pay to go watch the likes of Wirtz and Eze and Zidane play five-a-side football. Honestly, that is because I'm watching it with my eyes. That's I'm registering. I love the game. You get. So hopefully we get to see dribblers. And guys, this is our second episode of the Pitch Side Nuggets. We're going to be doing this at least twice or 3 times in a month, depending on how time allows us. And please, guys, check Barry. He's on all socials. He's on TikTok. He's on Instagram. He's on Facebook. He's on X as well. And we'll keep doing this. And hopefully next week we'll see you again. Thanks for listening and catch you later.